Good afternoon. I hope you had a good morning, and it's already almost half of the afternoon has gone by. So we're just going to continue today. We're going to do about an hour of culture and maybe some intro to values, and then we're going to do the rest of the time will then going to be about the assignments for roots. So the project plan or the heuristic evaluation as well. So to give you a chance to work on those elements, and that will be the plan for today. So it's a 2 hours or less, a bit less than the 2 hours that will go super fast. Before I do that, are there any questions about yesterday or any housekeeping questions? Okay, so let's do this. Now, before I forget, if you remember, we're going to have a organizational analysis that we will also need to do in this class. And ASP Security with Sarah, who's the director of HR, has kindly reached out and accepted to be the company that we're going to learn outside of Roots, that we're going to learn about how ASP Security is actually integrating some of the concept that we're learning in class when it comes to culture, business type, structure, culture, values, leadership, giving feedback. So I have spoken with Sarah, and she will come and introduce herself and introduce ASP to us in one of our class. And that will be March 2nd, I believe. So the first week of March. So the Tuesday session of that week will be all about ASP, and she's really, really excited. So I did share with her what we have learned and what we will have covered by then. So, but really the goal is for her to come, introduce the business, and then we are going to be able to work on our analysis and find out and learn more about ASP. We talk about maybe a case study, where she's going to be sharing maybe a case study with her, and maybe we're going to have some questions around it, how we would have handled with it. And then we're also looking at potentially having having a meeting and be invited to one of her team meetings with her staff. And she's in HR, so I think anything that we're talking about that we are seeing will make a lot of sense in a real life environment and setup. She's really, really fun, and she's really excited. So you may want to start thinking about ASP. I know there's a lot of things to think, but you don't need to prepare or submit anything. But I've put a brief about ASP on part of our assignment, on their assignment. There's some questions or things for you to think about. And I also created a document. I'm not sure if I've shared it with you, but it's the document I shared with her. So that is ASP, so that you know I haven't forgot about it. Perhaps maybe you were hoping I did. But she's excited, and I think it'll be a fun session. She's got a lot of energy. You think I have energy? She has twice as much as I do. So let's continue with our topic then. From yesterday, let me just share with you the PowerPoint or awesome. So I'm just going to skip through what we've talked about yesterday. Okay, so what you will find when it comes in terms of culture, I think yesterday we've mentioned about culture is something we do, not something we are. Safety is very, very important. Google has a good study about safety, psychological safety. And I think Rogers for Lucy was lacking a lot of that. Sharing vulnerability, exposing yourself as a leader, as a manager, to show that no one is perfect, no one knows all. And we are all human beings. We are all we all have our own fear, success, values. We are all together. And then establishing purpose, really, really important. A good team leader will do this as well. So it's also a question of perception. So, and I don't think we've talked about it. Why do we see processes? Why do we see rules? Why do we see that in certain places they're flat? Why do we see in certain places they have a tree hierarchy? Why do we see that some businesses spend more time with their people? Why do we see that some businesses trust or mistrust their employee? It all comes down to what the leadership people view, how they view people, how they actually view people, how they view their partners in market. For example, are employees self-motivated or not? If they think that employees can't work without rewards or motivation, and they think that people are not motivated, and allowing someone to work from home to that person may actually mean that They're gonna work. They're not gonna work because they can't trust them, and they think people are lazy and people don't want to perform and do good work. So this is maybe why they'll choose not to do work from home, as an example. So it will decide. It will their view of how people perform, how people are motivated, will affect what they will or will not put in place as well. So the other thing with hierarchy is hierarchy needed or not? Do they view that people will do without being told? Or if you only do what you need to do when you're being told and not have self-discipline, and the management doesn't think that people are capable of having their schedule and be only in all of what their people need are objectives and how to get to the objectives, uh, they don't need much support and they don't necessarily need to be reminded. That may explain why you may have more hierarchy, or why you may have more rigidity about processes and someone always checking on you. So you have to think about what we see in terms of structure that we've talked about. The lack or more processes, or the lack of processes, the policies or the lack of policies, being able to work from home, not work from home, often will comes down to how people view their staff and how people view people internally. It will come from them too. So you have to think about you. Do you think people are all self-motivated? If you were that next leader, how do you view your staff will make a difference on how much rules and how much structure or no structure or flexibility you can or you cannot have. Now, the other challenge will be with certain people. Now, everybody is not homogeneous on your team. You may have someone who's very self-motivated. You may have someone who's not necessarily self-motivated that needs to have a bit of a more of an incentive. So you need to adapt to the reality of each and every one. And that's probably the most difficult part as a leader. So the more you expose yourself to your leader, the more you're being transparent to your leader, the better he'll get to know you and the better he'll be able to support you and maybe give you the flexibility that you want versus someone else who needs more structure. Maybe he'll be okay with you to work from home, but work from home is a bit tricky. It's hard to give work from home to someone and not to someone else. But he will maybe leave you more alone because he will know that you know where you're going, and he gives you an objective and he knows it will be done, right? So very, very important, but it really comes down to how we view performance, how we view people, and how we view people in work. And this is where organizational behavior really helps. Doing research, doing study, and bringing that to leaders and manager. And often leaders, people that lead people, will go to classes, they will be trained, they will learn, they will have coaching to make them better leader. And often this is what they're going to be learning as well. So in our conversation about culture, there's multiple things that have come forward. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but all people are culture. There's the notion that culture is share. But I would say you need balance because you don't want everybody to be homogeneous, because then you can become that you're almost not diverse, and or you're doing discrimination. So you need to have that balance, and that's probably something that is a challenge too. And I don't think we'll be able to go in a lot of details, but as a leader, you want diversity, but you don't want everybody to all fall into the same, and all look the same and all behave the same. But at the same time, you need to have some convention that everybody will agree and everybody will adapt. But you still need to be able to respect differences in individualism within a business, to be careful not to fall into having little cliques, subgroups, and subculture within culture. If you read through some of the reading, that is probably a risk. Is you're gonna starting having subculture within culture that are not aligned with the main culture, and then it creates conflict as well. And then people start isolating, people start building little cliques. If you think of Lucy, I think some of that has happened at Lucy too. Very, very mindful. So as a leader, as a manager, you need to create those opportunities for people to come, work together, communicate better, share, and share who they are, and share and be included as well, and avoid these little walls. So there are things that the structure can allow and facilitate this. If we think of how people are seated where people are seated, how powerful bringing people all in one place. We even talk about being in circle. So as well, will help to that inclusion and avoid people creating their own little mini culture within the business. So there are many things to pay attention to. The culture also can evolve and change. And I think Sarah, when I spoke to Sarah, she did mention that one of her big project right now is cultural change. So I think it'll be very interesting to hear from her. What is the change that she's trying to bring in and how she goes about changing and why? Why is she changing the culture? The culture is so powerful. It's the DNA of a business. It's about people and people beliefs and people behavior too, and it's hard to change. We know that anytime that we say change, people change. uh, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, and you really have to be very, very rigid, and there are things that you need to do, and I have a few slide, one or two slides that talks about how do we bring culture change. It comes from the top. It really comes from the top, and sometimes the top actually gets eliminated and new people are brought in. That has happened at Uber. There was a very toxic culture, and I think it's one of the article I share with you. The CEO actually who found Uber was actually is no longer the one that is leading the business now. There was a very toxic. You're gonna hear toxic culture, discrimination, no diversity. I think there was a sexual harassment, and there was a long list which people did not feel safe, and it was pretty bad. It was actually bad, detrimental to the reputation and also to the business performance. And what happens is you start losing people, and people talk, and then you have a hard time recruiting people too. So they've rehired someone to completely change, but it starts from the top and how the top view people, right? So it's hard to change, and but I think that when it happens, then it happens quickly. But you need to have the right people, and sometimes it means changing the leadership as well. Very important. And sometimes it's maybe just a matter of uh, letting go someone. And as you've heard, it takes one bad apple to have a really negative impact on the entire team, no matter how good you are, how many, how technical you are. And Lucy was really good. I think there were one or two apples at the digital team that she was facing, and I think that some of those apples are actually gone today. The digital culture and was really it was a very challenging for multiple facets of Sun at Rogers, and I think she was probably definitely ill prepared to this as well. So let's continue. There are about 100 plus definitions of what culture is. It's a set of rules as well. It's what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. In some culture, bad behavior is acceptable because why? There's no consequences. And people continue to do until someone will come and say, this is wrong, this is not acceptable. And that is maybe the first step to actually do a cultural change as well. So now, some people may be aware that it's happening, some people may not be aware that it's happening, but from the moment that it's happening and you're made aware, and it goes and it puts the business even at risk. When you think of sexual harassment, it puts the business at risk and the people at risk. Then something has to be done, and you have a responsibility to actually maybe even inform your manager. And businesses will have policies and training to actually go through that kind of training, and it will tell you responsibility as an employee of do or what you should do and not do as well. So this is part of training, and I'm hoping that Sarah will have some insights on this, and maybe these are areas that you guys want to explore further with her. You may hear cultural shock. You may have heard of cultural shock. It's really, and sometimes you'll see cultural shock when, like, Lucy comes to business where it's completely different, but it was really difficult for her to assess. That's going to be also a challenge. Is how do you assess the culture before you go? And I will tell you, there's an internal culture and there's an external culture. There's a culture that you want people to view you as, but when you go into it and you are in a company, there's something maybe sometimes completely different that is happening. So they may say that they're customer focused and employee people and all about the people, but when you come to do the opposite of people, of being employee and being supportive. So that is a risk, and they probably rarely going to really tell you the truth, or they will in the interview, but I've been giving you some hints or some signs and things that you should be paying attention to so that you can assess what that culture is. Now, maybe this is a question to Sarah. How do you assess the culture when you don't in the interview? Or when you pick a business, how do you even assess? What kind of question? She's from HR. She would probably know and be able to give you some insight. What will be the questions that someone like you could be asking? So I've been focusing on culture as general, but there's the UX and there's culture, right? So for example, of some culture more inclined for UX. And I've been trying to be able to talk about that specific topic of how do we assess the UX and the readiness of UX. And some of the slides you may already have seen them. But really, when you look at you first, I would say you look at the quality of the UX. So UX is about people being inclusive, being curious, innovative, consumer focused, research, and agility, multidisciplinary. We work across all businesses. We need to be able to talk. We need to be able to almost like, I hear flat structure. I hear a lot of agility, quick, short cycles, so we can learn insight. If you have a culture that is very hierarchy and very, very silo, and you can't talk to the person next to you and you have to ask your boss, it may be harder to do UX in that setup, right? Then another setup where it's flat, where there's not as much as barrier to actually even be able to talk to your customer. Maybe in some businesses, it's easier to reach out to your customer. In some other business, it's hierarchy and marketing. It's everybody owns and everybody trying to protect. And I think some of that was happening at Rogers for Lucy. Then it's hard to even be able to talk to the customer because you always have to talk to marketing or you have to talk to someone above you. So you will face this. So I believe there are some environments that are more prepared for UX. But I would say, mind you, every day now, and most every business has people from UX. But I think that will be an important element for you to see what your tolerance level will be facing those obstacles and how long you're going to be able to tolerate those obstacles versus a place where it will be maybe easier as well. So that's another way you can also assess the business in general, but when it comes to UX specifically, what are the success factors for UX? And then how do you map them out to a company culture or not? Why do we care? It's about performance. So if you have a culture that will bring the best of the people, that will take into account individual characteristic, that will motivate people or put the conditions in place for your staff to be motivated, feel motivated, to wanting to perform and do their best. And if you give as a business the right support, the right time, the right reward system, how you promote people, setting objective, the environment in which you're operating, the tools that you're giving to people, the management, how management think about you. If you have all of what is we think as we define as good culture, and then you will get a lot more from your people and you'll perform better as a business. It's not going to be about competing. It's not about individualism. It's one slide, we're coming to that. So at the end of the day, good culture will favor performance. And if you remember, organizational behavior cares about performance, predicting, and then being able to help the business to be successful. So I'm going to skip performance and what some of the performance drivers might be. I do want us to be able to spend some time in the breakout rooms too, because I don't think we've had a chance to do that in the context of the topic. But when it comes to culture and then everything's around culture, even structure, I think it really comes down to the culture dimension. So the dimensions are closest to probably what I've said earlier, how management think of people in general. And it's defined as this. I think that the lack of structure or more structure, the hierarchy or no hierarchy, or being really focused on their people, or being all about results and being about performance and market and getting those customer market share. I think there are symptoms of around the dimensions that are listed here. So if a company is more about individual versus collective, then that is a sign of how the culture is. And if it's very individualist, then this is maybe where you have hierarchy and you have all the silos, and people are not multidisciplinary teams. And the objectives are per department. There's no common objective, common purposes. And it's all about competing for your colleague is actually your competition. Your competition is not your real competitor. Your colleague next to you is your competition within the company versus collective. So, and I would say both businesses will have one of the following that will be dominant for that business. They may have one or two, and we're not saying that a business cannot be all of this at the same time, or they're not in between. In fact, they are. They navigate through individual and collective and quality and tougher and tender, but something dominates. But when do we know that something dominates? It's when they face a crisis as well. So when you face a crisis, this is where you have to pretty much stop everything that you do, and everybody has to be mobilized. And I think it's the instinct. So it's like when you fear, you're gonna run. You're just gonna run. You may actually, and it's actually not going to be your brain. It's your primary brain who's actually going to make you run. You don't even know that something is happening, but your primary brain is saying, "There's danger, run," and you actually may run in the wrong direction. But you just know you need to run, and it's you're not thinking. It's not your consciousness. It's actually subconscious that will actually be thinking, and your primitive cortex that will make you move and do something. And then you're going to realize, oh my God, what's happened? And then you're going to see that something has happened bad or good. Maybe you're going to hear a bang. Maybe you're going to hear a gunshot. Like you don't even have time to think. So in crisis, we almost get into that mode. And if we go into that mode, it means we go where we naturally go as people. And you will see that. And I think it's talked about. Culture is when times are good or when times are bad. But it's when something really happened bad that you really see what the true culture is. You know, when we say it's also in time of crisis that you really see your friends, you really see when good people come together. It's because it's the intention, and the real intention is actually getting people to take actions. So that is really, I think, what is happening. So, but really, you're gonna have businesses that will be towards more individual or collective, and then they will vary between individual collective. They might be in between. Then you're gonna have maybe some businesses that are more about equality or hierarchy. Rogers is probably very hierarchy, and they're individual as well. So then you can think about what the opposite and what the combination can be. Tough of tender. So if you're tender, then you're more about people. If you're tough, then you're tougher. You're very rigid, very specific, and then you're gonna have maybe more rules than maybe more bad consequences, or your reward will be very different as well. Uncertainty, avoidance, how tolerant are you to unknown, how you're going to try to actually avoid of being in a situation where you don't know much. So maybe this is where you don't really want to do work from home because there's too much unknown of what is happening at work from home as well. So and then time, the notion of time and how we see time. And I think time is maybe easier to think about in terms of culture, like people, culture, and different culture, how we actually think of time. But maybe some businesses really think this is the only opportunity, and then it's also sequential. It comes in a sequence, and nothing can be completed before something else is done, and this is where they have more of a waterfall. Past, we've done this before. We've done this before. It didn't work. Or let's look at today. Let's look at today and be appreciative and really see where we can make a difference today. Let's try something new. Let's try something different. Maybe it didn't work, but maybe it's going to work because the conditions have changed. Or maybe they're about future. They don't really want to deal about the current. They always think about maybe there's something better, which you also need to. But I would say the best world, you take the best of all these dimensions and then you make it work for your business. But I think that if you go and you start asking about how the business view individual collectiveness, how do you think equality hierarchy, will give you some answer about culture, really, and what's driving some of their decisions. So I've put some questions on the right-hand side. How do we look for, how do we even know? So do people identify primary as individual or member of a larger collective? If you're in an interview and people talk about me, I did, I did, versus we did, our team, our team, the team, then you will know they're thinking more about collective. Even as the leader, if the leader says me and me, I have this done, I'm great at this, but never talks about his people. Our team, my team, the business, our business, our success. Look at the choice of words. It will say so much. You're in UX, you know about looking beyond the words, right? Or you're really paying attention to the words. Do people with different level of powers and prestige equally or unequally? And you will be amazed to see how some people being managers get it to their head. And we have an expression in French, it says tête enflée. It means like your head is swollen because you're like suddenly you're a leader or you're a team lead. You think you have all the power, and actually they're gonna talk you down. That says a lot about hierarchy, and that says a lot about how they will treat you, possibly as a staff, as an employee, and it negatively impact trust, and then you can just imagine performance by itself. To what extent do culture emphasize combat, like being tough, you're fighter, or you're actually going to compromise? When you're kinder, you're trying to please. You're trying to make people happy. You want to make sure that the people are happy as well. You're not competing. You don't see your next, your neighbor as a competition. And then how do they manage risk? Are they willing to take risk? Are they tolerating when there's ambiguity? Or do they need relative little structure? That will say if a company is actually okay with not knowing but taking risk, or if they are so worried about things and what might have happened that hasn't happened, then they'll put all that structure. That will say a lot about the business. And you can almost apply all of this to people, to us individually. Where do we each fall? And maybe that's a little something that you can think about yourself. Where do you fall? Are you more about individual? But it's not about being one or the other. Sometimes you may be more inclined to one another. And that will say something about you as a leader, as you as a manager. Actually, you can also ask people around you, how do they see you? How do they view you? You may have surprises. So you see how many exercises or little tests that you could do. But before I continue, are there any questions or anything here that you would like to expand? This is a good time, and we can continue. I put a graph here, just a visual representation that I also try to bring the dimension into different axes. There's a link to more details about it. But on the very top left, there's the clan culture collaborate. So this is more about we're not competing, we're a collective, we're a team, we're trying to collect, we're not tough, we're on the tender side, we trust our people. And then you will see mentoring, extended family, behavior. So these are behavior, and this will say something about the culture, but it's flexibility and discretion. So how much flexibility do we have, and how much discretion? How do we adapt to the individuals? Versus internal focus and integration to the left, are we very, very much about ourselves, us? The clan culture is very much about their people. They're not there. It doesn't mean they don't care about customer, but their first and foremost priority will probably going to be the employee. And then they probably believe that by doing good and being good with our employee, then what's going to happen is we are actually going to get a better outcome from our people. Therefore, they're going to be more motivated. They're going to be out there getting new customer, and then our business will do well. So versus the market culture. The market culture really thinks that unless they push customer to buy the products, unless they're all about results, how many sales have you done? How many customers have you called? It's all about doing the job. It's all about competing and have high achievement, but not so much about the people, because they think that people actually are pretty good on their own, and then they actually sometimes maybe forget about rewarding their people too. It's all about being productivity, being very, very aggressive out there, wanting to win. So it's not so much about their people. It's really always being there and being the best. So they'll think first and foremost about the market and sometimes forget about the people. But it does not mean that they are only this and they cannot be the clan culture. The businesses, as I said, most businesses will navigate, but there'll be one that will dominate. They're going to dominate. If you are startups and maybe you're about innovation, you're about people, you want to be dynamic, you're probably in this area. This, we're probably government. Remember, if we try to put the types, collaborate, people, culture, the people, maybe this is more the cause, nonprofit as well. But Humber, Google, Netflix are very much about collaborating too, and they do very well. So, but they think that by spending time in here, in this area, they actually get to get out and they will be in market very, very highly competitive. And a lot of people are looking for them as well. So I thought this would just be another way for you to visually try to put them. And then this is also a, as I've said, there are probably some tests. I think there's tests with specific score to assess a company to see where they are. And then this is like a personality test, but it's like a personality test for businesses. And then you see that maybe they're more, this one is open culture. They have more flexibility, they have the flexibility and discretion, and they are about the people. They have to tendency to be in this area, so they probably have, they're more in the clan culture, but they have some degree of this, not as competitive, and they have some structure too. So, but they're more about flexibility and discretion, where in this company, they're more about stability and control. They need stability and control. They don't deal well with the unknown and the uncertainty. They will actually avoid. And they're also very much about the market. There's more items in this, right? So market structure, rigidity. They're not so much about innovation and the people advocacy. You may read about what advocacy is if, for those of you that want more of an explanation. But these articles have a lot more about this. But one cultural, one business is not just one. You have multiple variation of these elements, these dimensions. And what I have done here is for you as well is I have put more details about the culture types, what you may hear of. You're going to hear that in the market, and these are things that you can ask in an interview, or we can ask about to Sarah. But I think businesses, most businesses, they're all going to have an external world, what they want people to view them as. But really, when you go in, this is where you as an employee will face. And sometimes you're going to be in conflict. You're going to be here because you may have clients. And then the clients, we're telling them that we are about innovation, but we don't. We're about status quo. We don't deal with uncertainty. And then you have to manage the people or even your people. And maybe that's what you've been told. You've been told we are about innovation in my interview. We are about empowering you. But really, when it comes to empower, actually, there's no trust and there's no ownership, and it's very hierarchy, and you do what we tell them you to do. So you're gonna find this, but you can trust and say, hey, a cultural performance. Maybe we're all about results. They'll say, well, a culture of trust. Great, talk to me about your culture of trust. People, culture of people. What do you do for your people? Diversity. Great. When was the last time that? What is your policy for diversity? Collectivism. They'll say we're collective. We all have common goal, but internally it's highly competitive. To get a promotion, it's really hard. Also, so these are more words, but it's all about those axes. We talk about safety and how safety is important. Being able to take the rest, being able to take risks together and being connected. You have some culture that will support that, but you'll have other culture that will actually penalize people that take risks and make mistakes. So that is not a risk taking, and that is not a culture that will encourage people to think out of the box and to improve maybe the product and do better. And if I think of Lucy, I think Lucy, she came from a director of optimization. So thinking that we were interested, Rogers was interested in learning, getting better, doing better, in kindly and genuinely wanting to do better. But really, when you look at the digital, actually optimization was a term that people were actually not happy with. It meant you're doing a bad job. People were taking it personal. They were actually not interested in learning about more. Some were, but the majority were resisting it and fighting it. So that is not a culture of wanting to improve. This is not a culture of risk taking. This is more of a culture of showing that what we've done is good, despite if how bad it might be in the market, so that we think that we're doing good work, but maybe we're not doing as good work as we should for the business. So I was hoping this will help you to put words. Amazon has 14 or 15 leadership principles. So let me share with you what some of the Amazon leadership principles are. You will see that they're touching axis of the culture, and they also touching about value. So they're mixing. At the end of the day, if we have a hard time to put words to, is this a culture? Is this a value? No one's going to penalize you. I think it's trying to understand what's behind it. What is the essence? And it's like information architecture. There's no one architecture one, but it's understanding what's behind and what understanding the rationale is a lot more important. But if you ever interview for Amazon, and I will tell you, Amazon interview process is really, really long. You spend a full day meeting people, and they're gonna ask you to prove that you behave in the way that actually shows that you've demonstrated the value, and they will pick on you uh, for hours. I think it's a full 8 hours of interviews. You meet people, and they interview you, and they ask you to show specific example of what you've done, and they're very, very structured. What have you done? What was the situation? They call it STAR. Maybe you want to note this. And that's going to help you for when you actually maybe trying to sell someone or convince someone or explain what might have happened. STAR for STAR. What was the situation? What was your target? What were you trying to achieve and fix? What were your actions? What was the result? If you can, even in your assignments, let's say in your assignment or at school, I think if at school, you can use this STAR. What happened? Maybe you're going to be giving us an assignment that says, here's the situation, what will you do, or what would you have done, or whatever. You can think of the STAR. What is the situation? Here are my targets. So let's say employee are arriving or never arriving on time to meetings. Our team is always late to a meeting. Situation, always late to a meeting. Your target will be, we want people to be on time. What have you taken as action? Well, every time that someone shows up late, the door is locked. And then we've put reminders to people. And then we've gave them back consequences. What was the results? People are showing on time, because showing not on time has the following consequences. The door is locked, you're missing on the meeting, and you're not going to give good quality, and eventually that could be that we're going to suspend you at home. That is how Amazon will ask you to do what you've done. So they have customer obsession, their leadership, and they call it leadership principle. We use the leadership principles every day, whether we're discussing ideas for new projects or deciding on the best approach to solving a problem. It's just one of the things that makes Amazon peculiar. And I think Amazon, yes, Amazon is a very market culture, a very driven market, but the people and having the people in the right structure and having the right environment and the right offices and desks, and then trusting their people and empowering the people helps them to have the success that they have. But customer obsession, number one, everything they do is about the customer. And they will ask you, what do you do for customer? How do you decide about the customer? And who do you decide? When there's something that competes with the customer in the business, who are you going to decide? Who are you going to favor as well? If you see that someone in the interview, your leader, the people that you're interview with, they keep saying I, they never care about their team, and then they make decision based on what is best for them, but not the customer, that will be a little bad for you, right? But we are in UX, so you care about customer, but you have to make sure that that it's really also done where you go. Ownership, owning. When they say leaders, they don't just mean that you have people reporting to you. In fact, leadership at Amazon, everybody's a leader, and they expect everybody to be a leader. So do you own? And if no one owns, take it. And if you knew the amount of time that I told my people at Sunwing, own it, run with it. Take it, own it, it's yours, and I will support you. If you fail, we're going to learn from it. If you succeed, we're all going to succeed. But own it. Don't wait for someone to own it. And think of it, ownership means opportunity to rise and shine, opportunities to learn something too. Who knows, maybe that's going to give you a next promotion. Yes, you need to have goals and ambition, but that will come from your core value and what's important for you. Why did you even pick UX? And why did you pick university degree versus doing certification, or certification as well as part? All things you need to think about. Invent and simplify. You see how you can put each of these things on the fourth quadrant? So invent, and simplify. Sometimes invent is not like the most magical thing, but it's to think about a way for consumer to be able to solve their challenges that they had. Are right and a lot. So what they mean by this is they want people to think that they actually have very strong judgment and good instinct and feel very confident in and not being afraid in a lot and very a lot, as opposed to being very shy, being very discreet and not necessarily bring forward what you think and not feel confident. Because what happens if you have someone who looks very confident and they think they're right and actually they are, but because they look at data, they've surrounded themselves with other good leaders, they've done their homework and due diligence and come across as very confident, more people will want to align than versus someone who doesn't look very confident and very vague and very actually not even sure and not even convinced themselves. And if you interview with them, you'll see a lot of that into them. But they're not arrogant. They're just very confident, but in a good way, in a nice way. Learn and be curious. Hire and develop the best. Insist on the highest standard. Think big. Bias for action. Frugality. What does anybody know what frugality is? Yeah, I know it's on screen, but without looking at it, frugality. What is frugality? So frugality is, don't think that there's going to be money to pay or you're going to have all the resources. Treat your projects or your money as if this is the only money you have. So you be super smart on how you're going to spend money, resources, or time. And Amazon, as much as they are successful and they have good money, they don't just spend money for spending money. Earn trust. We're going to talk about trust. Earn. Trust is earned. Because I'm the professor in this class doesn't mean that I'm competent, doesn't mean that I know teaching and I know UX and I know all these things. So I have to earn trust from you. And you probably on day one you had an opinion, or you had, you were skeptical, and maybe you still are skeptical, and that's okay. But I have to earn your trust that I actually can help you in your learning. We all have to. It doesn't matter if we are teaching or we've been hired by Humber. It will be the same with your boss. And I think this generation, your generation, you don't take for granted that people are there, that they're necessarily qualified. But what I would say is you have to be respectful, and I know you are. At a minimum, these people have been chosen because they must have done something good. And then, but you will want to earn your own trust from each people, from each of your manager, even your colleagues. And yes, there will times you'll go, why was this person even hired? This will happen, but it happens. It will happen throughout your career, and you will wonder why. And then, as you explore a bit, you'll understand why. And then sometimes you may not. That is a reality. But we all have to earn trust and show that we are still the best person for what is needed at this point. There's a very good book, and I don't know if I mentioned it. There's a book called "What Got You Here Will Not Get You There." So you may want to make a note of it. It's actually pretty good. You're still young in your career, but maybe you will enjoy that book to be aware of things. And because you're very successful today, in 10 years, you may have to rethink about yourself. You may have to revamp yourself, because what has brought you in 10 years may not going to be what will bring you to your next. You might have to change certain things or change how you think about things. So I thought Amazon, you would enjoy seeing some of Amazon and some of what they value and what they look for, and they actually hire for those values. So what we've said, how do you change a company culture? You're hiring the people that you bring, and as I said, sometimes you let people go. If the leader, the chances are when Uber and when they make decision to let go someone at that level, other people will follow. So that is an opportunity to rehire. Why? It's because you're completely changing. You're bringing new blood. It's not just new blood for new ideas and be better as producing better products, but it's also about people and how people change. And sometimes the time to be able to change someone from moving away from being individual to collectivity will take so much time that there's no time for that business. And maybe the only thing is to bring someone who's very about collectiveness and inclusiveness and diversity. And then it will hire people that will follow that. Your hiring process and criteria is one of them. And maybe we're going to hear that from Sarah too. So this all happens. We don't just get hired because we're good people and we're good technicians in UX or research, it's most likely about who we are and how we deal with crisis. Emotional intelligence, which we will have a chance to talk about in class 2. Okay, so I would say, let's see if there's anything else that I want us to go further. We've talked about this. I want to make sure what you see is what I see. Okay, Amazon. There are more and more. How do we change? You may want to read values. Okay, I'm not going to talk about values, but I will give you an exercise. I'm going to send you to breakouts, which I don't think we've had a chance to do this in breakouts. And we are going to look at Netflix, Google, Zappos, Twitter, and Shopify. So there's an article here. I'm going to paste the link. I'm going to paste the link in the chat so you can all have access. 5 examples of company culture to inspire your own. So let's pretend that you have to choose. You have to pick. You have to think about, where am I going to go and work tomorrow? Am I going to go to Google? Am I going to go to Netflix? Am I going to go to Zappos? Am I going to go to Shopify? Shopify, Sarah has had an experience with them. So this article talks about each one and what is so unique about the culture, and they talk about culture. I think they talk about values. So what I'd like for you is I'm going to create a few breakouts. I'm going to send you the breakouts, and I would like for maybe individually, you'll take maybe 5 or 3, 4 minutes to maybe read, and maybe you're just going to take one companies and talk about what you found. Maybe you want to take the first company. You take the first company on the list. That is Netflix, and then just go through Netflix together individually, and then as a team, you just maybe want to talk about what is so unique, and some of the questions that I thought I want you to think about these guys. Hold on, let's change my view. So what is unique, or what is the company culture? What is Netflix? What is the culture at Netflix? Or maybe some of the values. And then maybe you want to think about, is this a company I would want to work for, or I would not want to work for? And then you can do the same thing for Google, the same thing, and then we'll see how far we go. But I'd like for you to have a chance to talk in outside of your respective team. So I will push you in random breakouts. You're going to be with people that maybe you haven't had a chance to do. I'm going to give you some time, maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes. But I do want to spend time on the roots as well and give you some time. So how does this sound to you, to be able to do this little exercise as a team, as teams? We good? Okay, cool, great. So let me create breakout, and I will come and visit as well. And then at some point, we're just all going to come back and then share what we some of our discussions were. I'll be around if there are any questions, obviously. Random number of groups 3. Groups 3. Maybe 2. I'll do 2 groups. Maybe 1 of 4, 1 of 3. Or do you guys want a smaller group? Open? Okay.